Detroit gets the headlines. Detroit gets the documentaries. Detroit gets the before and after photography, the ruin porn, the comeback narratives, the think pieces about what happened to the American industrial city. These 10 cities get none of that, and that is a problem. What happened to them is the same thing that happened to Detroit: deindustrialization, population collapse, tax base erosion, concentrated poverty, and infrastructure built for a city 3 times the current size. But this all occurred without the national attention that might have brought scrutiny, investment, or even the faint possibility of a recovery narrative. Detroit had 1.85 million people at its peak. When it collapsed, the whole country watched. These cities peaked at numbers small enough that nobody noticed when they started falling, and they have been falling ever since. Here are 10 of them. Each one has a specific exhibit. Each one has a decision, a policy, or a structural failure that made things worse than they needed to be. The indictment is not against the people who live there, it is against the systems that left them there. Exhibit 1, East St. Louis, Illinois. Start here, because East St. Louis is the clearest case. No ambiguity. No, but the downtown is coming back. No recovery narrative to complicate the story. East St. Louis sits across the Mississippi River from St. Louis, Missouri. The Gateway Arch is visible on a clear day. The two cities are in the same metropolitan area. They are 20 minutes apart by car. The per capita income in East St. Louis is approximately $14,000 per year. The poverty rate is above 40%. Nearly a quarter of the city's housing stock is vacant or abandoned. The school district has been in and out of state receivership. The murder rate at its worst has exceeded the murder rates of some countries in Central America at war. The industry that made East St. Louis what it was, meatpacking, manufacturing, the aluminum ore company, the stockyards, left in stages through the 1950s, the 1960s, and the 1970s. The exodus was accelerated by the East St. Louis race riot of 1917, one of the deadliest in American history, in which white workers attacked black residents over job competition, killing an estimated 40 to 200 people. The number has never been definitively established because the city never fully investigated it. The companies left, the white middle class left, the tax base collapsed. The city entered a cycle of service cuts that made it less livable, which drove more people out, which further shrank the tax base. That cycle has been running for 60 years. East St. Louis is not recovering, it is not stabilizing, it is contracting. The population that remains is largely there because leaving is not financially possible. The Gateway Arch is still visible from East St. Louis. Nobody on the observation deck is looking this direction. Exhibit 2, Camden, New Jersey. Camden sits directly across the Delaware River from Philadelphia. One of America's great cities with a world-class hospital system, major universities, and a functioning economy, is close enough that you can see it from Camden's waterfront. That proximity has never helped Camden the way anyone hoped. The poverty rate in Camden exceeds 30%. The city's per capita income is among the lowest in New Jersey, one of the wealthiest states in the country. The violent crime rate runs consistently at roughly 3 times the national average. But the specific exhibit against Camden is not poverty or crime. It is what happened in 2013. In 2013, Camden dissolved its entire police department. Every officer was let go. The city could not afford to maintain the police force under existing union contracts. The solution chosen was to eliminate the department entirely and reconstitute a new county-level force that rehired many of the same officers under new, cheaper contracts. This was done as a cost-cutting measure in one of the most dangerous cities in America. The reconstituted force has produced genuine improvements in community relations. Crime statistics have moved in the right direction by some measures. The city still has 3 times the national violent crime rate. The exhibit is not that the dissolution was wrong. It may have been the least bad option available. The exhibit is that a city across the river from one of America's great metropolitan economies in one of America's wealthiest states was so fiscally depleted that dissolving its police department was the only affordable path to keeping policing at all. That is what structural failure looks like from the inside. Exhibit 3, Scranton, Pennsylvania. Scranton had a moment. In 2005, NBC's TV series The Office began filming a fictional paper company set in Scranton. The show ran for 9 seasons. It introduced the city to a generation of Americans who had never thought about it before. The actual Scranton is not Dunder Mifflin. The poverty rate is 23%. The population has been declining for decades. The city peaked in 1930 with a population of 143,000 and now sits at approximately 77,000. The median household income is $50,739, significantly below the national median. The specific exhibit against Scranton is the pattern of financial decisions that turned a difficult structural situation into a recurring crisis. In 2012, Scranton's mayor cut city workers' pay to minimum wage, including police officers and firefighters, because the city could not meet payroll. A court order reversed the cuts within weeks, but the episode illustrated exactly how close to the fiscal edge a city with Scranton's structural problems is operating at all times. Scranton's underlying problem is the same as most Rust Belt cities. The industries that built it, coal mining, manufacturing, and railroad infrastructure, declined through the 20th century and took the tax base with them. What distinguishes Scranton is how long the decline has been ongoing and how little has changed the trajectory. The city that was once called the Electric City, one of the first in America to have an electric streetcar system, now has a per capita income that would not cover rent in the metropolitan areas that absorbed the jobs and workers who left. Scranton's poverty has been running since 1950. Exhibit 4, Bridgeport, Connecticut. Here is the specific absurdity of Bridgeport. It is the largest city in Connecticut, which has the highest per capita income of any state in the United States. Fairfield County, where Bridgeport sits, is called the richest county in America. Greenwich is 12 miles away. Westport is 12 miles away. These are municipalities of hedge fund managers and Fortune 500 executives. Bridgeport has a poverty rate above 20%. Its unemployment rate has consistently run nearly double the state average. It nearly filed for bankruptcy in 1991, and it was declared solvent by a federal court only after significant legal dispute. It has been on Connecticut's official distressed municipalities list for over 15 years continuously. The exhibit against Bridgeport is what Connecticut chose not to do. Westport spends $7,782 per resident on municipal services. Bridgeport spends roughly half that on a population with dramatically greater needs. The state's school funding formula has been repeatedly criticized for directing inadequate resources to cities like Bridgeport while providing substantial support to already wealthy suburbs. Bridgeport was Connecticut's chief manufacturing center as recently as 1985. General Electric, Remington, Bryant Electric, and Raybestos all had major operations there. When those companies left, the city's tax base collapsed, services deteriorated, the remaining middle class had less reason to stay. The tax base contracted further. Connecticut, one of the richest states in America, has watched this happen for 40 years. The policy response has been consistently insufficient. Bridgeport has been distressed for so long, the word has lost its urgency entirely. It is no longer a crisis designation, it is simply a description. Exhibit 5, Hartford, Connecticut. Hartford was once the richest city in the United States. That is not hyperbole. In the decades after the Civil War, Hartford was home to the most profitable insurance companies in America, a thriving manufacturing sector, and a concentration of wealth that made it among the most prosperous cities per capita in the country. Mark Twain lived here. The Colt firearms empire was built here. Aetna and Hartford Financial were headquartered here. Today, Hartford has a poverty rate of 25.5%, the highest of any city in Connecticut. Its median household income is $45,300, the lowest in the state. 3 out of 10 families live below the poverty threshold. The city's credit rating is junk. In 2017, Hartford's mayor formally stated the city was on the verge of bankruptcy, a $65 million deficit on a municipal budget. He requested state assistance. A state bailout arrived in October 2017. The exhibit against Hartford is the timeline. The Brookings Institution documented Hartford's structural crisis in 2001, 16 years before the 2017 near bankruptcy. They said the city had a deeper crisis rooted in market irrelevance and social isolation. 16 years of documented, studied, analyzed deterioration preceded the moment the state finally intervened. And the intervention was the minimum necessary to prevent the headline. Not a structural investment, not a recovery plan, but a bailout large enough to keep the city solvent through the next budget cycle. Hartford's credit is still junk. The structural deficit still exists. The population is still declining. The one thing that changed in 2017 is that Connecticut got to avoid the headline it was trying to avoid. Exhibit 6, Peoria, Illinois. Will it play in Peoria is an American idiom for whether something resonates with mainstream, middle American audiences. The phrase dates to vaudeville, when traveling shows tested new material on Peoria audiences before taking it to bigger cities. Peoria was so reliably average, so representative of ordinary American life, that it became the national standard. That version of Peoria has been leaving for decades. Peoria's population and metro area have been shrinking continuously. The poverty rate is 21%. The violent crime rate places Peoria among the most dangerous cities in Illinois. In 2019, a CBS report identified Peoria as the 15th deadliest city in the country. High school dropout rates above 30% and a poverty rate above 20% are identified as the primary drivers. The specific exhibit against Peoria is Caterpillar. For most of the 20th century, Caterpillar, the heavy equipment manufacturer, was the backbone of Peoria's economy. The company employed tens of thousands in the region. Its fortunes and Peoria's fortunes were essentially identical. In 2017, Caterpillar announced it would move its global headquarters to Deerfield, Illinois, near Chicago. Not because the company was struggling, because the suburban Chicago location was better for recruiting talent and it was closer to an international airport. A company that had been headquartered in Peoria since 1925 relocated its executive leadership because the suburbs were more convenient for the people at the top. The manufacturing operations largely stayed. The decision-making moved. The prestige moved. The signal that Peoria was where the important decisions happened, that moved too. Caterpillar is still there in the sense that factories remain. But the version of the company that made Peoria's identity moved to a suburb because the CEO's commute would be better. Exhibit 7, Rockford, Illinois. Rockford is the third largest city in Illinois, with 150,000 people. Its violent crime rate is 92% above the national average. Aggravated assault rates are among the highest in the Midwest. The school system averages an F grade, and only 19% of students meet academic proficiency standards. The exhibit against Rockford is not the crime or the schools. The exhibit is the silence. Chicago dominates Illinois' narrative so completely that a city of 150,000 people with a crime rate 3 times the national average does not exist in any meaningful public discourse about what is happening to Illinois. Rockford had a manufacturing economy built on machine tools, fasteners, furniture, and automotive parts. That economy deteriorated through the 1980s and the 1990s as manufacturing relocated. The 2008 recession hit Rockford catastrophically. Unemployment exceeded 15% at the peak, among the highest of any mid-size American city. The unemployment rate has come down. The structural conditions have not improved. The poverty concentration persists. The schools remain chronically underperforming. The crime rate remains 3 times the national average. None of this generates national attention because it is not dramatic enough. Rockford did not file for bankruptcy. Its mayor did not cut police salaries to minimum wage. It has simply been a city with serious, documented structural problems that receives no national scrutiny because Chicago is in the same state. When cities are invisible, the political pressure to address their conditions is absent. When political pressure is absent, conditions compound. Rockford is compounding. Exhibit 8, Gary, Indiana. Gary has been discussed on this channel before, but Gary belongs on this specific list for a reason that the statistics alone do not capture. Gary is the most complete case study of what happens when the company that built a city decides it no longer needs that city. U.S. Steel founded Gary in 1906. Not moved to Gary, founded it. The company purchased the land, platted the streets, built the infrastructure, and named the city after the chairman of its board of directors. Everything in Gary existed because U.S. Steel needed it to exist. U.S. Steel's employment in Gary peaked in the early 1970s at roughly 30,000 workers. By the 1990s, that number had dropped below 6,000. The company automated. Each productivity improvement required fewer workers to produce the same output. The people who built Gary, the steel workers and their families, owned houses, paid taxes, and raised children. They did not own U.S. Steel. And when U.S. Steel no longer needed them, the city they had built around the assumption of continued employment had no alternative economic foundation. The population went from 178,000 to 70,000. A 60% decline over 50 years. The tax base built for 178,000 people now serves 70,000. The infrastructure, the water system, the roads, the schools, was designed for a city that no longer exists in that form. The City Methodist Church, Gothic and massive, abandoned since 1975 and being slowly consumed by vegetation in the middle of a functioning city, is still standing. Nobody has demolished it. Nobody has restored it. It simply sits there as a physical reminder that Gary has been managing the consequences of U.S. Steel's decision for 50 years, with no adequate support system for doing so. The exhibit against Gary is not the company's decision. Companies do what companies do. The exhibit is that the American policy framework for what happens to cities when their founding industry leaves is essentially non-existent. Exhibit 9, Youngstown, Ohio. Youngstown is the most thoroughly documented urban decline in American history. Researchers, urban planners, sociologists, and economists have studied Youngstown for decades. It has been the subject of academic papers, policy reports, federal studies, and planning conferences. It is probably the most analyzed small industrial collapse in American history. It has not helped. The steel mills began closing in 1977. The largest closure, Youngstown Sheet and Tubes Campbell Works, happened on September 19, 1977. That date is still called Black Monday locally. 10,000 jobs disappeared in a single announcement. The regional employment losses over the following years were catastrophic. Youngstown's population peaked at 170,000 in 1930. It is now approximately 60,000. The decline is 65% over 90 years. The poverty rate exceeds 30%. Residential vacancy rates in many neighborhoods exceed 30%. The specific exhibit against Youngstown is what was done with all the documentation. Youngstown became the model for right-sizing, accepting that the city is smaller and will remain smaller, and planning accordingly. Vacant lots were converted to green space. Abandoned structures were demolished rather than left waiting for investors who never come. Infrastructure was scaled to actual population rather than historical peak. This is the correct approach. It is honest. It has improved conditions for the people who stayed. It has also been cited at planning conferences, published in academic journals, and adopted as a model by urban planning programs at universities, while Youngstown itself remains a city with 30% poverty, 30% residential vacancy, and a name synonymous with deindustrialization. The model traveled to planning departments. The resources did not travel to Youngstown. Exhibit 10, Chester, Pennsylvania. Chester is the least visible city on this list. That is the point. Chester is 18 miles south of Philadelphia. Population approximately 32,000. Poverty rate above 40%. The city has been in Pennsylvania's Act 47 Municipal Financial Distress Program, the state's fiscal oversight mechanism for struggling municipalities, in various forms for decades. Never fully resolving the structural problem. Never collapsing dramatically enough to force a solution. The violent crime rate in Chester has consistently ranked it among the most dangerous cities in Pennsylvania and among the most dangerous cities of its size in the eastern United States. Police staffing is chronically below what city officials say is necessary. The school district faces simultaneous state intervention and ongoing financial shortfalls. The exhibit against Chester is the mechanism of invisibility that operates on all 10 cities on this list at the same time, but it is clearest here. Chester is too small for national crime rankings, which focus on cities above 100,000 people. It is too close to Philadelphia to be geographically interesting. It looks like a troubled suburb, not an abandoned industrial city. It is too poor to have a constituency with significant political leverage. And it has been a recognized problem for so long that it is simply the background condition of Chester, not an emergency requiring urgent response, just the way things are. The cities that get resources and attention are the ones with crises dramatic enough to make national news. Detroit had $18 billion in debt and a formal federal bankruptcy proceeding. That made news. Chester has had 40 years of grinding fiscal distress that has never produced a single national headline. 40 years. No headline. All 10 of these cities share one characteristic that matters more than any specific statistic. They are places where the systems that were supposed to work, the industrial economy, the municipal government, the state oversight mechanism, the federal policy framework for deindustrialized communities, failed in sequence over decades in documented and studied ways. The problems were known. They were written about. They were presented at conferences. They were cited in policy reports. They were not fixed. The people who live in these cities are living in the gap between those two facts. Detroit got famous. These 10 cities did not. That distinction has consequences that are still playing out right now in every city on this list, every single day.